just pop any questions in the chat, and again, our colleagues will help us figure out what those are. So without further ado, we'll make a start. So Joe and I are here to talk to you about what we do as a party in Westminster, what our politics team does, maybe how that's changed from the election up to now. And so I'm going to hand over to Joe. Joe's going to give a bit of an overview and talk about some of the key priorities. And then I'm going to talk about what we're doing sort of into the future and the new campaign that lots of you will have heard of on these calls before. So hand over to the big man.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. And thank you very much for making some time to be with us today. It's much appreciated, and I hope this session is useful and interesting, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, your reflections, but also any issues and any aspect of our work in Westminster which you wish to raise. As Caitlin says, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the basics about where we're up to and what we do and what that looks like. Caitlin's going to take us through some of the pieces that we have into the future as well. So for those I haven't been able to meet before, my name is Joe Fortune, I'm General Secretary. Caitlin is our Head of Politics. So you've got the two best people to talk about this topic, I hope, tonight. I also had a background in working for the party for the last 15 years in this space. I've seen various iterations of the Co-operative Party working in Westminster, what it means, what it looks like. So I'll bring some of that experience to this session today. At the minute, we're at an historic high in terms of Westminster representation. We are in a place where we have just over 40 members of the House of Commons as Labour and Co-operative. We have 15 peers who are also Labour and Co-operative. Now, that's not the extension of all the members in the PLP, in the Parliamentary Labour Party, who are co-op. Indeed, so 2/3 of the PLP are members of the Co-operative Party who just don't represent the Co-operative Party. So of that sort of 40 in the Commons, which we'll look at a little bit in detail today, they're set up in all sorts of different ways, which you would expect. So we have half of those are ministers, and they are ministers in a wide range of departments. Now, this is going to be a real word soup for people, but I'm going to have a go. We've got ministers in things like MHCLG, the Communities Department, or Defence. There's MOD, or there are Treasury ministers, there are DEFRA ministers, there are CMS ministers, and it goes on. So there's about 9 different departments of which there are cooperative parliamentarians at the minute. There are also 4 or 5 members of the Cabinet who are Labour and Co-operative. Now, in historic terms, that's a really high number. In historic terms, those numbers haven't been there before. Now, Labour, regrettably, our sister party, isn't in government as often as we would like. But if we put it all together, we sort of feel that maybe we have more ministers and cabinet ministers here and now than the party's had over the last 50 or 60 years, at least, put together. And it gives a sense of where the party has come. It gives you a sense of that sort of trajectory that we've been on. So they're the ministers, but also we have select committee members and chairs. So there's plenty of members of select committees, and the chairs include chairs of the MHCLG Select Committee and the Treasury Select Committee. Select committee is hugely important to bring scrutiny to the House, bring scrutiny to the government, and we've been working very closely with them as much as we have ministers. Outside of that, we have some Labour and Co-op members who are whips in the chamber, and we also have some backbenchers doing a wide variety of all the things that you would imagine the backbenchers do. So that's sort of how they set up. You've got to remember that we don't have a Co-op party whip necessarily. What we do have is an ability to work with our cooperative parliamentarians to try and advocate for the campaigns and the things which are of intrinsic importance to the cooperative party. So you will see, and I hope you've seen, plenty of activity since the election and before of Co-operative Party parliamentarians standing up and saying, this campaign's important to us, this campaign, this issue. And here and now, mercifully, Co-operative ministers echoing it back and saying, yes, we know that. We believe that as well. So myself and Caitlin and other colleagues work with parliamentarians as much as we can to extract the maximum value for the Co-operative Party and the co-operative movement as we possibly can. For my money, I think we are in a place of success in that endeavour. Now, success in Westminster can look like many different things, and maybe we'll touch upon the different types of activity. But we are looking to have Co-operative Party parliamentarians advocate for Co-operative Party campaigns and policy in a wide range of ways, whether that's debate, whether it's questions, whether it's written questions, whether it's public bills, maybe it's bringing forward private members legislation, maybe it's doing some of the quieter work of influence, some of the work in the corridors, as they say. We want to see them being as passionate an advocate for the Co-operative Party as myself and Caitlin and the whole team. Myself and Caitlin spend maybe half of our week in Westminster for our sins. We have a Co-operative Party office in Westminster, and we are using that base to try and ensure that we are as visible a presence as we possibly can be. We get together once a month as a parliamentary group to agree and to talk about the sort of work that we're up to. It is a hugely important piece of our month, as is working with those who aren't cooperative necessarily. We want to make sure that we're not just focusing on this 40, we're not just focusing on the 60 in total, but we're actually thinking about how can we use Westminster to advocate on behalf of the cooperative movement. That's our basic aim. Now, if you look at that in practice, and there might be other aspects of that piece about that, like that basic sort of setup that you want to talk about, and that would be good. But how does it look in practice? We went into this election with 4 different priorities. Our priorities were double the size of the cooperative sector, institute a new community right to buy and extend community ownership, to achieve the local power plan and historic increase in the community-owned energy space, and also to bring forward legislation to better tackle retail workers. They were the 4 pieces that we really focused on ahead of the election, and I hope and I suspect that colleagues have seen that over the past 18 months, 2 years. Now, what are our parliamentarians doing in those moments is what I'm going to touch on before we start touching upon the future and our Community Britain work. So something like double the size. Double the size of the cooperative sector will require not just government action, but it will also require legislation, regulation. It will require potentially funding. It will require certainly things to do with education as well and development support. Now, different types of parliamentarian are going to help the Cooperative Party with different aspects of that work. So we have Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Johnny Reynolds, as Labour and Cooperative, who's able to advocate and lead our work on double the size. We've seen Johnny do that in this last week by bringing together the entire, huge numbers of representatives from the cooperative and mutual sector to Downing Street to let them know about that government commitment, to show that leadership is what we require there. We have junior ministers within the Department for Business and Trade. Gareth Thomas, who was previously a chair of our party for many years. Gareth is leading on cooperative work underneath Johnny. So we're working with Gareth, making sure that aspects of his cooperative work, whether that be command papers or whether it be strategies on small business growth or business support, has got cooperative intent, cooperative delivery measures built in. So he's doing some of the day-to-day ministerial work. But then we need members of our group to be raising these issues in the House, showing their support across the House, showing their support across the wider Labour family for these issues. So you'll see cooperative parliamentarians standing up and saying, Mr. Thomas, how's it going? What are you doing? What about? And that's some of the work of scrutiny. It's some of the work of our backbenchers. And that is a process which happens at oral questions and debate, whether it happens within written questions as well. So we're trying to bring together the aspects of parliamentary scrutiny, ministerial support, to bring all of these things to bear, because if you had only one aspect of it, our job would be much harder. So you'll see the leadership, you'll see the day-to-day piece, but also within other departments. So within Treasury, there are Labour and Co-operative Treasury ministers who are thinking about how to better enable financial mutuals, how to better enable capital raising for cooperatives more generally, to think about some of the wider issues of double the size, to think about how that fits the local and regional economic growth. And, you know, members like James Murray would be one, who's Economic Secretary, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, thinking about how can he use his role on behalf of the cooperative movement to add towards that government commitment to double the size. That piece also spills into maybe 5 or 6 different government departments. So you would see double the size aspects in MHCLG, within CMS, and a range of others as well, maybe even DESNES. And forgive me for that word soup. I'm going to try and keep it relatively short, but that is the Energy Department, the Communities Department, Communities and Local Government Department, and the Culture, Media, Sport Department. So we're trying to make sure that they're working together as much as possible to deliver upon the government's growth commitment to our sector. In something like the local power plan, we've seen cooperative parliamentarians not just advocate for GBE within public bills. So there's been a bill to set up GB Energy, and within that bill, what has happened is cooperative parliamentarians have been standing up through the course of that bill, committee stage, second reading, third reading, and report, and saying, look, we need to ensure that cooperative owned energy is reflected in this government bill. We want to see that. And we've also seen government ministers, cooperative party ministers in that department reflect that and amend that bill to ensure that there is community-owned energy reflected on the face of the GB bill. Now, it's not work which catches the eye. It's not always work which is the standout piece from the week. But you'll see the Co-op Party talking about it. You'll see us putting it up on our socials. You'll see us putting it into our emails. And that's the day-to-day work of how are we trying to navigate the, you know, Westminster and what they term, you know, Whitehall and the corridors of power, to ensure that our work is being reflected and being taken forward, not being forgotten. And I think that there's something to be said here about government, which is there's an awful lot of priority. There's an awful lot of good ideas. There's an awful lot of endeavour, which sometimes don't go as far as is deserved. And with the Co-operative Party Parliamentary Group and with the Co-operative Party more generally, is you have one of the most effective operations in the Labour family to ensure that these things are not left on the shelves, are not forgotten. And I've watched the Labour family work in Westminster for the best part of 20 years. I've watched how the Labour family change and amend the way in which they engage with parliamentarians. And I can assure yourselves today that we are one of the most effective parts of that Labour family in doing it. And you'll see it day to day. You'll see it in the way I've talked about the local power plan, but also the way in which we've articulated a future for community ownership and a new community right to buy in England. From our point of view, there's a wide range of organisations who articulate the need for this community right to buy. The Co-operative Party was able to put it into that Labour Party manifesto, but also to work post-manifesto to ensure that ministers in the Labour government will, I think, from what the reports I read, will come forward with a community right to buy within forthcoming legislation. Now, again, we will probably only communicate when it happens, but that will take weeks and it will take very careful work of Co-operative Party parliamentarians and myself and Caitlin to take us to that point. But it will be a defined moment in time which we can say to ourselves, the Co-op Party did that. Now, the retail crime one is quite similar. There's a policing crime bill at the minute, which is just finishing up its common stages, and that's got our wants for better tackling retail crime and retail violence. That arguably has been talked about from other governments. There was even commitments made by previous prime ministers on this topic. But this is the first bit of legislation which includes the clauses, the important changes that we wanted to make. Now, that was as a result of Co-operative Party, USDOR and Co-operative Society campaigning. It was as a result of very coordinated work with our parliamentarians, very committed and detailed work to push that over the line. Because what we have to recognise as a group, and I will hand over to Caitlin now before I bore everyone, what I think that I recognise now that I think I was surprised about more than I thought I would be post-election was when we asked the British state to support cooperative endeavour. The British state hadn't been asked to do this before, and you know, they haven't been in a mindset to want to grow the cooperative sector. They haven't necessarily wanted to grow community ownership. They certainly hadn't wanted to grow community-owned energy. They had taken a view of retail crime, which was different to that of our campaign and peace. And I don't believe that the civil service was in the mindset to understand that this was a priority of this government. Now, it takes an awful lot of very detailed parliamentary work, not just with ministers, but with the other types of organisation. For example, we have a member on the Treasury Select Committee. The Treasury Select Committee is also chaired by Labour and Co-operative Meg Hillier, but also we have another member on that Select Committee. And she sits there in different types of meeting, whether that's with permanent secretaries of the Treasury, whether it's with the FCA, whether it's with other financial regulators. And she says, yes, but what about co-ops and financial mutuals? And we've seen that type of work really unlock the way in which Treasury officials think about our work, or financial regulators think about our work. So again, it wouldn't be the most catchy type of comms material, but it's the whole work that we have to do, and as hard as we have to work, to persuade a civil service who weren't geared up to support cooperative endeavour, in my view, over many years, to now start to take it seriously. And as a tiny vignette, before I hand over for the future to Caitlin, is that there are now civil servants tasked with cooperative growth. Now, there weren't before, and there haven't been before in many, many years, decades. Now, it's not enough, my view. I want many more. But those small changes, allied with some of the bigger changes I've talked about in government legislation, in private legislation, members' legislation, is the work of the Co-operative Party parliamentary group and parliamentary operation. And I think that that's sort of that's harder work than it sounds, because we're competing against so many other interests, so many other priorities, so many other bigger and sometimes more significant lobbies than ours. But we have an advantage, and we have an advantage of being an intrinsic part of that Labour family, of that Labour movement, of our very clear-eyed view of what our cooperative movement needs as well, gives us a coherence towards trying to drive for that change. So hopefully that's helpful or interesting about how I see our parliamentary work. But Caitlin is in charge of this work, but also in charge of where we're going with it as well. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And there's a couple of quick things to just add, I suppose. 3 quick things. One is to say, Joe's been doing this work for 15 years and I've been doing it for 1, having come back. So I guess the thing to say is that all of that stuff that Joe's described starts years before Labour gets into government, and it's a really long process with the movement, with people on this call, with wider colleagues in this team and colleagues in the movement, to get to a place where it can be in a government manifesto and it can be put into action, and it's worth just like noting that journey, I suppose. And I sort of came in at the perfect time, so I was like, we'll come in and we'll just have a go at doing it. But it's a long journey to get there. The second thing is just, and Joe sort of touched on this, but it's just to say the purpose of this call is to sort of share with you guys what the process is, and Joe's talked about how that process isn't always something that is public. A lot of it happens in really boring ways, sort of constantly being on the phone, constantly being in meetings, sort of being in the right rooms with the right people, saying the right things again and again and again. And it's really not a case of having one meeting and something happens. This takes, you know, a huge amount of persistence, and that's sort of the less glamorous side of politics, I suppose.
If there is a glamorous side.
I haven't seen it yet.
No.
And the third thing to say as well, which we maybe should have said at the start before we talk about Community Britain, is this call's about our work in Westminster, but obviously where our campaigns work best, and the examples that Joe has spoken about all do this, is where we can connect our people in Parliament with co-operators at all levels of government. And so something like retail crime is probably a really good example. Like, you've got parliamentarians raising it in the chamber, working on legislation. We had quite a few of our people on the bill committee, so like doing that line by line scrutiny, getting stuff in. But then we also have, you know, metro mayors working on it, doing different things in their respective areas. We have police and crime commissioners, obviously hugely relevant to that work, doing really innovative things with their local police forces. We have councillors doing things in council chambers around motions. Then we have colleagues in Wales and Scotland working on how that looks respectively there. And so when things work really well is when all of those different levels of government are doing are sort of cooperating around that campaign. And so there's a whole gang of stuff that happens in Westminster that both feeds and responds to what happens in the rest of the party as well. We'll talk briefly about Community Britain because we want to make sure there's time for questions.
And by the way, make sure you're putting up that virtual hand if you want to come in after this piece, or making sure putting things in the chat as well, so we can answer any questions and queries from yourselves as much as we can. We've
opened the chat on our screen, so if people want to ask questions to Joe, he can think about clever answers while I speak. But yeah, so we've spoken about Community Britain a few times in this sort of particular season of Co-op Live, but just to sort of talk about it a little bit before we go to those questions. So Community Britain was a campaign that we launched at the start of this year, so at the start of 2025, and what it aimed to do was sort of bring together all of the priorities that we had going into the election that are now sort of being implemented in government, and also take us into the future. And what we noticed, well, not noticed, what we already knew, but what became even more clear when we looked at those priorities together and the things that we wanted to do, was that the clear thread was communities and the political, social, economic importance of communities that we think should be taken really, really seriously by the political system, but haven't necessarily been taken as seriously as they should, and sometimes have been a bit of an afterthought. And so we launched the original Community Britain sort of campaign and document at the start of the year, which was a collection of what we called stories from Community Britain. And it's a piece of work that we're really proud of because it tells stories from different parts of the country where communities are taking a really strong lead in responding to problems locally, basically. So whether that's, Ambition Lawrence Weston in Bristol, community-owned energy project responding not only to the climate crisis, but also to cold homes on the estate, to driving up local participation in politics, to funding the local youth club so that the kids have somewhere to go. Whether it's, a church in London that we visited that had looked at the needs of the community and opened up its space to different community projects to have literal physical space to do the stuff that they needed to support different aspects of the community, or I should have had one with me, whether it's Stratford Public Hall in Greater Manchester that we've worked with a lot, grade 2 listed building that was at risk of closure, got taken into community hands, and now is a thriving community centre that does everything you could possibly imagine, supporting pretty much everyone from the community in different ways. And we wanted to provide a little bit of a platform for those people to tell those stories that we don't just think are nice, but are also vital for politics, and for the Labour Party as well. And so in terms of where it's off to in the future, so we've done a couple of different things on community, well, quite a lot of different things on Community Britain, actually. We did some polling with Hope Not Hate. I know a lot of you were on the call that I did on that, talking about how people feel about their local community compared to the country as a whole, and where sort of rebuilding trust might come from. We did a publication and an event specifically on community energy and how you sort of give communities a stake in the clean energy future, and how that should be key to Labour's Great British Energy Plan, which Joe's spoken about. We've gone to see community-owned music venues and talked about how being owned by the community means that they can be so much more than just a gig venue, right? We've done work on social clubs, working men's clubs, these amazing buildings that exist in so many parts of the country that have had this rich history and now need to be revived for the future. That's part of Community Britain. And so there's a whole gang of stuff that we want to do into the future, whether that's looking at what Community Britain means for local economies, what it means for big social problems like loneliness, you know, all these things that we think the broad principles of Community Britain allow us to do as a movement, while also talking about all the stuff that we've been campaigning on for years and years, and that people on this call will have been part of. And so, yeah, definitely an opportunity to chat about that, to take ideas about what that should look like. And I guess the final thing to reflect on really before we have a chat about it is that we think there's a really significant political moment for communities right now. We just had a spending review from the Chancellor in which she kind of committed to giving some money to communities to do some of this stuff. We've got, as Joe said, like hopefully some legislation coming out that further empowers communities. But we think there's a political argument to be had about the significance and political importance of communities as well. And so we're trying to be a leading voice in that, and sort of see what we can do with it, really. That sound right to you?
Yep,
sounds right.
That's about there. And it's a slightly different call today, in that sometimes when we do Co-op Lives, it's platform and ideas and other organisations and some of the campaigns that Caitlin's just talked about. This one's a little bit more, you know, about the Co-op Party, about, you know, what we're trying to do. So I hope that's come across in what both Caitlin and myself have said, and I can already see hands up in the from colleagues. And I'm going to start bringing colleagues in. Caitlin said about the chat and give me time to think about a clever answer. Everyone's put their hands up to give me no time to think about a clever answer, so that's good. But I'm going to take in questions in twos, if that's all right, just to make sure we get through as many colleagues as we want. And there is something there as well to come to in the chat. So Grigor was first. So Grigor, if we're able to bring you off mute, come on in.
Yes. Good afternoon. I want to know if the mayor, they do in the city, clean the city on summer. If the mayor cannot clean the city, can do in the winter. This program they have because the city, so many trees in the city where I am here in Manchester, and it's 1 year no see the clean, you know.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Grigor. We'll come back to that as well. Cavan.
Thank you. Yeah, just wondering, what can we do to increase the number of people involved with cooperative housing and things like cooperative models of housing management like TMOs, because I'm involved in a TMO myself, and I've seen firsthand how well they work at bringing people together, empowering people and communities, and also sort of like improving the quality of life for residents as well. So what could we do to sort of drive forward to get TMOs and cooperative housing, models of management back on the agenda, and, really get people involved and get them infused?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Let's take these two, and then we'll bring in other friends and colleagues as we go along. Now, look, on the Grigor's question there, just at the start, in terms of some of the basics of what is the work of local government, or indeed devolved mayors. Grigor, I'd point you towards, I think, within the comprehensive spending review, there's been a really specific amount of money given by the government. I think it's within their plan for neighbourhoods, which is designated towards pride in your area. And I think that outside of some of the aspects of local government spend on refuse collection, we've seen some of the issues that has been thrown up in that area in Birmingham. This government, from what I've seen from the spending review, has started to talk an awful lot about, actually, we need to live in an area which we're proud of. We need to live in an area in which we feel comfortable and safe going out of our door. I've started to see that within some of the spending decisions that they've taken. Now, also, I think I'm right in saying, now don't hold me to it, Grigor, and that this isn't necessarily a part of Co-operative Party endeavour. I think it's the largest local government settlement in the last 20, 30 years from this government, post-CSR. I think that if we look at it, that the Department for MHLG, Housing, Local Communities and Local Government, has received one of the largest financial settlements ever. Now, I hope that is to tackle some of those issues, because some of the things that Caitlin talks about within Community Britain is about having that sense of utility, that sense of empowerment, that sense of pride, that sense of democratic ability with where you live. And that being not just an important issue for politics, but an important issue in terms of economic growth and other things. So I hope, Grigor, that post-comprehensive spending review, that you'll see a government which is recognising that with pound, shilling and pence. Now, that doesn't necessarily won't cover every aspect of local issues, but certainly is a piece that I've seen them talk about in recent days and weeks.
Just on that before we talk about co-op housing, because it links to something that we did in the second Community Britain report, which we polled like 1,000 people, and we talked about all sorts of different things. But one of the things that came out quite clearly, I thought, that I've really taken forward in my work, is that people really do care about the NHS, about schools, about transport, about big public services and how they work and how the state makes them work. And I think that, like, Labour Party colleagues know that and talk about that a lot. What they also care about, though, is like what they see immediately when they come out their front door. You know, what do the roads look like? What does the high street look like? What have I got access to? Do I have a local pub? Do I have a local community centre? Do I have a sporting facility? And what's the state of those, and what's my relationship with them? And I think politics has maybe been less good sometimes at talking about that and putting weight and importance on that. And so that is another sort of real strand, as Joe says, of Community Britain, is that like pride of place stuff. How can we get to the end of this parliament, the next election, and be in a place where people walk out their door and feel much better about their immediate area, not just better, but feel like they are part of it and that they own it as well. So yeah, just worth, and we'll all of those reports are available on our website as well, so you can have a little look and see if it resonates.
Definitely.
Co-op housing.
Co-op housing. I think the Co-operative Party will be doing more work in cooperative housing over the coming months than we've done over the previous few months. I think that, from my point of view, about both cooperative housing in a purer sense, but also aspects like community-led housing, but also CLT, community land trusts as well. I think there is a moment of time coming. I think that this government has got a very large stretch a target for housing. I think it's harder when we only have 0.3, 0.4% of UK housing stock to say, look, we can be the next definitive piece. But why I don't think that is because we've never been properly supported. We've never had proper cooperative housing tenure. It's been a want of the cooperative housing sector since the mid-70s to have tenure, to have the basic ability to be able to turn around to professional service and say, we exist. Now, without those basic bits of underpinning, it's very hard. Now, at the minute, we're working, myself, Caitlin, other colleagues are working with organisations like CCH on tenure. We hope that we have good news to share in the coming months. We will be working with our parliamentarians. You'll have seen that Andrew Pakes did a 10-minute rule bill, so bringing forward private members legislation on this topic about 2 months ago. And that's the Co-op Party saying, look, we do want this. We do want to see this. So it's a great piece of 10-minute rule private members legislation, but there was a purpose to it. The purpose is to try and persuade that set of officials and ministers that deserves a place in upcoming government legislation. And I hope that we're able to give some good news later this year in that space. I'd like to think that is something the Co-operative Party is able to achieve, because then if we get the basic underpinnings, then we're better able, Cavan, to be able to articulate exactly what you've said, to show the experience of it being a normal, a better, a more productive way of living, to break that dichotomy within the UK about owning your house or being renting your house, not something other parts of the world are encumbered by. But without that basic bit of underpinning, I think that we'll struggle. But I do hope that we have good news, and colleagues are working really hard on new campaigning in that area. And just before I bring in Jim and John, I'm going to just tackle a question in the chat, which is about the Law Commission. Really fantastic. The Law Commission has started a piece of work on cooperative. We were talking about underpinning. Some of the underpinning is about, is our legislative framework right? Is it encouraging and promotional of cooperative models? And our argument is no, it's not. One of these pieces is the Law Commission is doing a reflective piece of work about the 2014-2015 Cooperatives Consolidation Bill. It's an important piece of legislation. And Joe, I'm able to tell you, yeah, cooperative parliamentarians are engaged. So some of our parliamentarians will be running all party groups, all party mutual groups, all party co-op groups, things like that. I know that they've been engaged in the ICA. We've had a Treasury Minister to the parliamentary group in recent weeks talking about this Law Commission piece. It is an important piece. And we're talking about, in this question, talking about some of the definitional pieces of what is a co-op. We do also then engage with trade bodies, with lawyers, with Anthony Collins, people like that, to ensure that our briefing and our work in this space are as reflective as we can do of what the wider movement is saying to us. So the wider movement is starting to say to us, we think that this definitional piece is getting towards the right place. So that's what we're feeding into the parliamentarians. And yeah, we've put Treasury Ministers' feet to the fire, if you like, on that particular issue. So now we were going to have Jim and John, but they've disappeared.
Changed their mind.
They've changed their mind. So we're going to take Danny and Kate. So Danny, are you able to come in?
Hi there. Yeah, hi. It's Danny here from Northamptonshire. Hi, Joe.
Hi there, Danny.
Hi. My question is, where's the beef? And what I mean by that is, I think there's fantastic stuff going on with the community work. Yep. But as you know, one of the biggest issues for Britain today is our utilities, and our utilities are firmly in the grip of the hands of money of muggers, of corporate muggers. If we're ever to hope to try and change that, we need to be able to raise serious capital investment. And also, I mean, and we seem to be getting farther away from that. And so my own co-op, which is Co-op, the rail co-op, what we're seeing is a realignment of the business, the rail business, in the way that energy and health is being done, which is actually more autocratic and more statist, which is really bad news because it means we can't borrow. So, and we'd love to do design, build and operate models where we can borrow against the assets of the business. And so that's my question is, what are we doing about the big money, Joe? And how can we get our hands on our utilities and help the Labour Party win the next election by bringing down the cost of living?
Danny, and I'm going to bring in Kate, but I'm all about seizing the commanding heights. Kate, and let's come back to that. That is a good question. Kate.
I put my hand up because 5 men had their hands up and no women had their hands up.
Right.
And quite frankly, I don't want to go back to the 80s. And also, we've heard a lot of talk about Britain, and you can probably tell by my voice, I'm Scottish. Nothing has been mentioned about Scotland. We've had specific legislation against crimes against retail workers for years. And you probably know that because of our history and our living knowledge of the clearances, where your granny's granny was probably cleared from the Highlands and Islands, then we have a huge number of community buyouts of land in the Highlands and Islands. But we're still plagued by the same kind of issues as in the rest of Britain, where on Skye at the moment there's a huge campaign against big business building masses of onshore and offshore wind farms that are going to basically overwhelm communities. And the communities on islands are small, and we also have a very incompetent SNP government that's bringing ahead, I'm sure that's Scottish, that's rushing ahead with building wind farms on and offshore, but they haven't got the infrastructure in place to get it south where it's needed.
Thank you, Kate.
Do you want to take one more?
And yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say, do you want to take one more?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go on.
Who's next on the screen? I can't see.
We've got Murad as well. Murad.
Yeah, we'll take one more. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
All good.
Good. Okay. In some ways, Kate's asked the question, but I'll say it in my words. I mean, thank you for highlighting our representation in the Commons and a legislative programme attached to it. I just thought it would be quite useful if you could do a similar thing in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, because we do have members in those places, and they do have legislative powers. I'm going, for example, to the Welsh Labour Party conference at the end of the month to argue for some reforms on the council tax basis, and I think they've got more discretion than we realise. So maybe that's something we should do if we're not already doing.
Yep, no, that's great. And let me just take that piece before we jump into it a little bit more detail and make sure Caitlin will make sure that I'm brief so that we can get more friends and colleagues in as well. Today's session has been that sort of slight Westminster focus. I think that's what we were trying to put across. You're absolutely right. There's other sessions where we are talking about different issues as well, and that work is happening in Scotland and Wales, certainly to talk about sort of some of the things that Kate's talked about. I'll tell you, land reform often crops up in our work in Scotland, and the MSPs are doing similar work to what we've talked about today in this Westminster setting. I do recognise that it's Westminster. I'm not a fan of having Westminster-centric sort of view of the world. I'm much more bothered about what we do across the country. I'm much more bothered about the 1,500 elected representatives rather than 41 that we're talking about here today, I'll be honest. They touch many more communities than the 41 that we're talking about here today. But this was aimed at a session which was trying to talk about Westminster, rather than one which was trying to cover the other areas. But what we'll do is we'll take away and we'll absolutely do sessions which are talking about what are we trying to do in local government, what are we trying to do in Scotland and Wales. Those sessions do often happen with members in those geographies as well. But Kate, just from for the sake of trying to bring it back to that sort of the point of this one being on Westminster, what we've been doing from Westminster in Scotland, rather than what is in that space. So we've seen we have a cooperative minister in the Scotland office who's been bringing together not just Treasury ministers but also cooperative and mutual business leaders in Scotland to Edinburgh to talk about how is it that we can link our Westminster wants to the wants of ministers like in Scotland, but also of that geographic nation, to like bring it to life north of the border as well. We've seen that also in our work in social clubs. We've been to social clubs in Scotland, again taking Westminster parliamentarians to it to try and bring forward that community Britain work that we're talking about. Okay, that is not the full answer that I want to give you, but it's the answer that time's going to dictate that I give you. Is the truth, Caitlin?
Yeah, no, I think it's worth saying as well, like where there is legislation that has been in place in Scotland or Wales, and there are examples of that, of both.
Community right to buy and the retail work that you mentioned.
In our work, like we were talking literally last week about how do you learn some of the lessons of like both good and bad of that legislation that exists. It's very much not like Westminster in a vacuum. It's sort of how can you learn from that? How can you make it better from the Westminster perspective, and then in turn hopefully make it better where it exists as well. So it's all a sort of a kind of group process, and it's worth saying as well that we have a good bunch, but in Westminster terms, we have a good bunch of Scottish Labour MPs, certainly that are members, same for Wales, and we will talk to them regularly about the issues that they think we should be thinking and talking about, right?
Yeah, there's an awful lot more to that piece. And Murad, when you're up in Llandudno, you'll see a great Co-op Party team advocating on behalf of Co-operative Party issues at that conference as much as you will hearing some of the pieces here today. We'll be talking about community ownership in Wales at that conference. We'll be talking about some of the energy pieces as well. You'll see that cooperative party influence, I hope, at that conference as much as any others. Unlike
Kate, I've lost my accent, but Wales is a great country, is what I'll say.
We'll have to take her at her word. But Danny, I wanted to just touch on Danny's point before I bring in other colleagues. Danny, I want to do more with Co-op. So if you're in that market, you think that there would be utility in the Cooperative Party working more with Co-op, I'd like to do that. I think the best place that we've articulated a future for mutually owned utility is within the Democratic Public Ownership for the 21st Century publication, which did go through things like water, energy and rail. I think that you are right in that through the creation of the Garda Man GB rail, there is better and more facility for passenger voice, passenger influence, but also ventures like Go Co-op. I absolutely do agree with you in that space. I think that they've been quite obsessed with getting to a point where GB Rail exists. I think that they've been quite obsessed with the transfer from passenger franchise to GB Rail operations. And I understand that it's a big piece of work, but I do think that there's a scope in the future on rail. If you look at our energy work, that is us putting a stake in the ground for different type of ownership within energy generation. That's not mutualising National Grid and some of the National Grid and some of the other big ticket aspects that you talk about. But in water, my view of water is that there are mutual options for water. They are not short term. They do not come about early. They are on a 25-year investment horizon, but it is possible. And I do see cooperative parliamentarians talking about it. I saw one in the select committee making this very point the other week. Danny, your challenge is a good one, and I think that there are opportunities into the future for mutual, cooperative and employee-owned aspects of some of these utilities. I think that I would take much greater time to talk about how I would I see those individual debates, where they're up to, what is our opportunity, but it doesn't make us any less committed. So hopefully that helps in a short answer, Danny, but there's much longer answers to come. So we're going to
let's take 3.
Yeah,
we'll answer 3 and then we'll take the last 2 because we don't want to run too much over and infringe too much on people's evening. So should we go for Mark?
Yep, Mark.
Hi there. Good evening. Say that my question is on the cuts around to the disability benefits and your views on how people with a disability will survive in and outside of the workplace, and more importantly, in the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Teresa.
Oh, hi. Next May, we've got elections across England, Scotland, Wales. What can you do and what can we do to make sure that co-op priorities and policies are central to the manifestos for those elections?
Thank you,
Great question.
Teresa.
Thank you. We'll take
John.
Jim is next. Jim next, and then we'll answer those and come back.
Okay, indeed. Thank you, Chair. I'm sure we'll appreciate the increased expenditure on the rail network and also bringing the rail system back into public ownership. Is it not time here that we actually allow the concessionary bus travel so that pensioners can, in fact, use the rail network as well? Because that would be a health benefit to elderly people. You're keeping them active and on the move. It would actually, in fact, save money on the health service, and bearing in mind that a lot of retired people, look after grandchildren, they do part-time work and indeed charity work. The pensioners have had a difficult couple of years, so that would be a way in gaining the support of pensioners back again who've had a rough time the last couple of years. So I just wonder your panel's view on that, because it would be popular with the public. In other countries, I believe that Germany, the retired people can travel the length and breadth of Germany on the concessionary travel there. So it's a popular move here. I think it would keep us on the right side of the other political parties. It would be a radical policy, an inclusive policy. I just wondered how the panel would like to see if we could take that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I think we'll answer those and we'll come back for the final 2. Do you think?
Yep. Let's do that. Okay, so Jim's question in terms of bus services, and it sort of links to Danny's question in terms of utility to a degree as well, in that there is room for greater not-for-profit and community ownership within bus service. Now, why I'm going to start at that place and come back to concessionary travel is because local bus markets, and let's recognise that there isn't one UK bus market, there are very many localised bus markets are broken. And why is it that we are seeing cuts to concessionary transport, or cuts to service delivery, or cuts to bus miles is a reflection of the broken local bus markets. The for-profit bus model is coming towards an end. And you can see that in the number of operators. So and we've had that in rail as well. There was 30 bus operators, pre 1998, there was something like 70 or 80 bus operators at least, and they would compete on different routes, and they thought that was going to work, and it never worked. And you can see now through things like franchising of bus services or greater public control of bus services, which is politics starting to recognise that this bus market doesn't work. Now, I think that the Co-operative Party has articulated a way of promoting community transport, which is often the lowest and the most basic aspect of safety net within public transport, towards for-profit delivery. And I think that I would like to see that in a greater way. I'd like to see, and we talk about this with cooperative ministers, both in DFT and in other places, is there is a greater role for not-for-profit service delivery. I think that that's where it will end up, and it will, Jim, where it comes back towards into concessionary transport is if you can get to a place where bus service delivery isn't for short-term private extractive profit, which is exactly where buses have been for an awful long time. You can get towards a more holistic view of how to have greater concessionary transport at a price which people can accept, because here and now the bus system is incapable of taking the amount of money from the government into service delivery in order to offer concessionary transport in the private operator's view. So what we have to do is solve the broker market in order to take us to a place where we are better able to see that as a better public policy tool. But again, it is something that myself and Caitlin will be speaking about, and we spoke about last week or 2 weeks ago with the relevant minister, to say, look, there's a different way. And I think that's the beauty of where the cooperative party and the cooperative difference comes to, that we have conviction within that place, but it comes from sometimes radical change of the system. Teresa, in terms of your point, is huge set of elections next year. I hope there will be many hundreds and over 1,000 cooperative candidates. I hope that we have a remarkable cadre of candidates in Scotland and Wales, but also over 1,000 across the UK in what is 140 councils up next year. A huge set of elections, ones that we take incredibly seriously. There are different answers to different parts of your question, Teresa, to be perfectly honest. There will be Build Your Own Manifesto being issued for English local government elections. There will be obviously manifestos for Scotland and Wales as well, but also some of the campaigning work that we've been talking about is the work of influence of what we expect from cooperative councillors. So we're training cooperative councillors, we're training prospective MSPs and MSs to try and ensure that what we have post-election and in the run-up to is really proud cooperative candidates who've got really practical cooperative policies at hand and been given in hand, and then lucky enough to secure the confidence of the electorate, the opportunity to bring it in place. Now, I recognise that's not a detailed answer to the question, but what I will do is I'll ask colleagues to put together a little piece for you, Teresa, post this meeting, just about some of how that works together and how that looks in practicality. But rest assured that that is something that the team here is thinking an awful lot about. And Mark, on disability benefits, I think that there's a couple of things to say here. Is that what I've seen is Cooperative Party parliamentarians being really strident on this issue, actually, over the period. I think that there is parliamentarians who have taken this on in a very big way. Rachel Maskell, for example, has been at the forefront of some of the work in this area. I think that it's sometimes very difficult for the Cooperative Party, who is seeking to advocate on behalf of that cooperative movement, to have positions on every aspect of government policy. I would say that there is work within our disability network in this area. I've seen them starting to hold meetings to think about what they themselves as Cooperative Party members can do within the circumstances which you talk, but also there's things to do with our policy process at the minute, which is thinking about this exact these questions, posing these very important questions for members to get involved in. So I think there's 2 or 3 aspects of party activity which does touch upon the issue. Now, we won't have a firm as our party is here to promote and protect the cooperative movement in its guises, we're not always going to have every answer to every issue, but you can rest assured there is work within the party on the issues that you're talking about today in that question. So Mark, if you want to get in touch with my colleague who's our equalities officer, Jennifer, she will also be able to give you further information in that area. Now, I recognise we're 4 minutes over. I tried to do it really quick. I haven't done it really quick, but I do want to hear from our last two colleagues, if that's all right, Caitlin, just before we finish for tonight. So John and then Richard, over to you, John.
Okay, can you hear me clearly?
All good.
Okay, fine. I want to bring you in a different dimension. In a sense, I'm concerned the party should be concentrating on just two issues. One, the introduction in the education system that nobody leaves school, college or university unless they've been a course of business studies in which at least 20% is all about co-ops. The second thing is we need legislation which covers cooperative societies. Behind me, you see a flag. That flag is from Japan. I am the good fortune to be married to a Japanese lady. Now, in Japan, in 1919, when the Co-op Party was formed in this country, the Japanese government passed legislation just for cooperative societies. In every school, college, and university in Japan, they have a cooperative society for their students and for their teachers, which runs the shops, runs the other things that students need instead of having capitalist people to do it. So half the population leave their university having been member of 3 cooperative societies before they go to start to work. There is an extensive cooperative movement in that country, and that is just in Japan. If you look at the same sort of thing, is they followed, and they are big followers of the co-op. They've even got one of the universities had a complete model of the Rochdale Pioneers. If we look to Europe, the same thing is the same. They're miles ahead of us. In Germany, 5 million people live in cooperative housing societies. In Scandinavia, it's 15% of people live. In Germany, a third of all retail banking is done by regional cooperative societies. Now, we need the first priority of the society, I would suggest to the Cooperative Party, is one, you don't need legislation. You get whoever's in the education department to insist that they start introducing something about cooperatives, because nothing is being taught. We talk to accountants, we talk to lawyers, they have had nothing in their education about it. We gave a presentation to a group of university students at a nearby university, and they said, you know, we've done an O level in business studies, we've done an A level, we've done a degree in Europe, and no one at ever time mentioned a cooperative option. That is a total failing. I'm sorry, after 100 years of being a cooperative party, we just haven't achieved the basics yet. Is there any hope that you will concentrate more of your effort on those 2 areas? I'm speaking not just of myself. I'm the editor of the Progressive Co-operator, so you will hear me. Some of your branches will already hear me banging on about that.
There's nothing wrong with banging on. That's all I do, John, as well. Let me get Richard's question in, and we'll try and cover your question as well. Richard. Oh, Richard, if you're able to come off.
Right.
You're good. Oh, you've gone back on. Blast. Try. My colleague will bring you off mute, Richard.
No, yeah, it's better. Sorry, there was some background noise going on that I was trying to deal with. I just wanted to back up. I think it was Mark's point about the PIP reforms and so on, and sort of ask what you're doing to kind of put pressure on to make them perhaps a little bit fairer than they appear to be at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Let me take our first question, which was from John. John, what is clear is that there are very many countries more advanced than ourselves in cooperative endeavour and cooperative ingraining within system. That's true. I recognise that. I accept that as the basic premise of where we're starting from. I don't think we're a paradigm of remarkableness within the UK cooperative movement. I think there's a good cooperative movement in the UK, but I don't think it's advanced as many others. We'll be doing a piece in terms of the UN year in the next couple of weeks, which is pointing that out. When I stand up in front of the Labour Party conference, that's where I start, which is a lot of other people do this an awful lot better than we do. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's the case? I'm really fascinated by the examples of the Japanese school cooperatives. I'll admit I've sat in this seat for nearly 20 years, and that's a new one on me. So I'd be really fascinated in the detail of it. But in terms of the wider point that you make, education within this country does not and has not accepted that there is a different need of understanding and development within diverse business models. We are seeking to change that. There are cooperative involvement in schools here now in the UK, but also within early years as well. We've supported cooperative movement endeavours to bring forward cooperative universities over the last sort of 10 years as well. We haven't seen it get over the line. I last was supporting University of Dundee to bring forward master's programmes for cooperative studies. I know that the building societies have managed to get one off the ground in Warwick. That is not enough. That is not where we need to be. So huge agreement from me, John, on that point of education. I've wanted to get some of the basics done in terms of legislation because I recognise that some other places do it really well. I recognise that we haven't even adopted the ILO recommendation 193, which says this government actually quite likes co-ops. We haven't accepted that in this country. Let alone have we got a modern framework for cooperative development, let alone have we got the encouraging legislation in individual public policy areas. So yes, we do have a big job of work on, but I'm not bowed, I'm not, don't shy away from that sort of challenge. That is the challenge that the Co-operative Party faces into. That's where we find ourselves today. And I'm quite determined that we will leave this period of Westminster government being in a better place. Now, that is the bit I get up for in some ways in this role now, is to ensure that the base and the platform that we've built over the last number of years is seen through into the government opportunity that we have. You talked about education there, and I agree, but there's other areas as well. I want to get to the point where we are generating demand for some of the professional service education pieces. I think that some of the professional service education pieces comes through demand. If there is demand for the cooperative model, all of a sudden you'll see professional service starting to understand that and starting to reflect that in the way in which they offer their services, because they rely on the invoices coming in. So we need to get the demand up to ensure that, and we talked about cooperative housing, great example, conveyancing organisations, housing lawyers don't think and don't know about cooperative housing because they haven't had the demand in order to need to. Now we need to stimulate the demand in order to bring professional service along. But I do think that there's something in terms of secondary education and higher education as well. We ran a campaign to get cooperation onto the national curriculum just 6 months ago for exactly the reasons that you talked of. So I think huge agreement for much of what you say from me, and I hope you feel a commitment from me, but also Caitlin, but also the wider team to try and take us to a very different place. And I'd love to hear more about the Japanese example that you have. And Richard, thank you for that question. And I think that you're right in that there will be individual members who are articulating on issues, within and without the Co-operative Party. I think that there is an opportunity for co-operative parliamentarians to be afforded that opportunity to have their view understood by virtue of their representation, by virtue of the positions they hold. I do see them doing that piece. I am engaging with that policy process. I think it's important that the party has a legitimate policy process which gives ourselves as officers that sort of ability to talk about other issues. I have to recognise for myself that I am an officer. I don't have a democratic mandate. I don't have policy creation. What I'm trying to do is articulate the Co-operative Party's policy platform as well as I can with our team as effectively as we can in order to do the basic job of promoting the cooperative ideal, promoting our cooperative values and principles into British politics. So I'll be working with members and elected members on that basis, but also cognizant of the issues raised by yourself and Mark. So thank you for those questions. Right, friends, I have talked, and Caitlin will rightly tell me off as soon as this call finishes for an awful lot of time. But thank you for joining this call today. From my point of view, I hope you find it interesting to see some of those aspects of our work. I don't know whether Caitlin will want more of me on Co-op Lives. I suspect the answer is no.
No.
Do you want to finish this off?
Yeah, look, we've both made some notes while everyone's been chatting. So thank you so much for being here and for participating. We really genuinely do appreciate it, and we sort of take it back into what we do day to day here. It's a little bit blurry, hopefully, on the screen, but Joe and I have a terrible habit of just writing everything down on paper. So behind us is our sort of original to-do list. I'm sure we'll be adding stuff to that off the back of this today. There are lots more Co-op Lives, I think, to come. I can't remember what the next one is off the top of my head, but please do keep an eye on your emails to find out what that is. I'm sure it'll be brilliant. Thank you for your time, and I'm sure I'll see you all soon. See you later. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye now. Bye. Bye, everyone.